He's mine. The words didn't sound like victory when I said them. They sounded like a confession I wasn't ready to make. The paper trembled slightly between my fingers, the DNA report catching the dim light of my office like it knew it had just rewritten my life. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched for miles, a kingdom I had built from nothing, every streetlight another reminder of control, power, certainty. And yet, in that moment, none of it meant anything. Because 8 years ago, someone left a baby at my gate, and I never asked why. I remember that night more clearly now than I ever allowed myself to. The rain had been relentless, pounding against the iron gates like it wanted to be let in. My security team had called it in, an infant, wrapped in a thin blanket, placed carefully just beyond the threshold. No note. No name. Just silence. I had stepped outside despite the storm, ignoring the protests behind me. The child didn't cry. That was the first thing I noticed. He just looked up at me with wide, unblinking eyes, like he already understood the kind of world he had been left in. "What do you want me to do with him, sir?" one of my men had asked. I didn't answer right away. I don't know why I said it, or where the instinct came from. Maybe it was the way his tiny hand had curled around my finger without hesitation. Maybe it was the absence of fear. Or maybe it was something deeper I didn't recognize at the time. "He stays," I said finally. And just like that, the decision was made. Liam. That's what I named him. It felt right, even though I couldn't explain why. He grew up inside walls most people would never see, surrounded by protection he never asked for. The best schools. Private tutors. A life designed to keep him safe from the shadows that followed me everywhere. I told myself it was obligation. Responsibility. Nothing more. But there were moments, small ones, that didn't fit that narrative. The way he would sit by the window during storms, watching the rain like he was waiting for something. The way he never asked about where he came from, as if part of him already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. And then there was the necklace. A small, worn pendant he refused to take off. We found it wrapped in his blanket the night he arrived. I had seen it before. I just didn't remember where. Not until now. I exhaled slowly, setting the paper down on the desk as the weight of it all settled into my chest. The truth wasn't just something I had discovered. It was something I had ignored. Because if Liam was mine, then she had been there that night. Close enough to leave him. Close enough to walk away. My jaw tightened as I stared out at the city again, but this time, it felt different. Smaller. Less certain. "Find her," I said quietly, not turning as footsteps approached behind me. My voice didn't need to be loud to be heard. It never did. I don't care how long it takes. I want to know everything. Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about why she trusted me with something I didn't even know how to protect back then. And why, after all these years, it still felt like she never really left. The file should have felt like closure, but it did not. It felt like the beginning of something I could no longer control. I watched the city lights flicker below, my reflection staring back at me through the glass, a man who had built certainty out of chaos now standing in the middle of a question he could not answer. 8 years. 8 years she stayed invisible while I raised our son without knowing he was mine. That was not coincidence. That was choice. And choices like that always came with a reason. "We found something," Daniel said behind me, his voice measured, careful. He had worked for me long enough to understand when silence mattered more than words. I did not turn right away. "Say it." A brief pause. Papers shifting. Her name is Emily Carter. 28 now. Registered nurse. Works night shifts at a small clinic on the east side. No criminal record. No known connections to any organization. She has moved 3 times in the last 8 years. Always within the same city. Always just outside our radius. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle in. She never left. She stayed close enough to see, far enough to disappear. That was not fear. That was intention. She watched him grow up, I said quietly. It was not a question. Daniel hesitated again, then answered. We believe so. A strange pressure built in my chest, something unfamiliar, something I did not like. I had enemies who watched from a distance. Rivals who studied my movements, waiting for weakness. But this was different. This was someone who had given me everything without asking for anything in return. Someone who trusted me before I had earned it. I pushed away from the window and walked toward the desk, my hand brushing over the edge of the DNA report again. Why now? I asked. Why let me find out? Daniel stepped closer, placing a second file beside the first. Because she did not intend for you to. We only connected the records because of the clinic audit last month. Her name came up linked to a patient file. Liam's. My head snapped up. Explain. 3 months ago, Liam had a routine checkup. The attending nurse signed off under a different name, but the handwriting matches hers. She has been near him more than once. For a moment, the room felt smaller. Not dangerous. Not threatening. Just closer. Like the walls had shifted without me noticing. She had been there. Not just watching from a distance. Close enough to touch his life without being seen. I let out a slow breath, my thoughts aligning into something sharper. She did not take him back, I said. She could have. At any time. But she did not. No, Daniel confirmed. She did not. That meant something. More than anything else, it meant she had made the same decision twice. Once in the rain, when she left him at my gate. And again, every single day after, when she chose not to come back. I reached for the pendant resting on the desk, the small piece of metal Liam never let go of. My thumb traced its worn edges, the surface smooth from years of being held. Prepare the car, I said finally. My voice was calm again. Controlled. But underneath it, something had changed. Tonight? Daniel asked. I looked at the city one more time, then at the file with her name written across the top. Emily Carter. The woman who disappeared into the background of my life and left me with its most important piece. No, I said. Not yet. Because this was not about finding her. Not anymore. This was about understanding why she stayed hidden, and what she was still protecting him from. The next morning did not feel like any other morning in my life, even though everything around me tried to pretend it was. The house was quiet in that controlled, deliberate way it always was, every movement calculated, every sound softened by design, but I could feel it now, something underneath the surface that had never been there before. Or maybe it had always been there and I had simply chosen not to see it. I found him in the garden just after sunrise, sitting on the stone bench near the far end of the property where the hedges grew high enough to block out the city beyond. Liam liked it there. Said it felt quieter, even though it was already silent everywhere else. He did not notice me at first. He was focused on something in his hands, turning it slowly, carefully, like it mattered more than anything else in the world. The pendant. Of course it was the pendant. He always held it when he was thinking. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have, watching him, studying the small details I had somehow missed for years. The way his shoulders tensed slightly when he concentrated. The way his expression shifted, thoughtful, distant, older than a child should ever look. 8 years, and I had never asked myself who he took that from. You are up early, I said finally. My voice did not startle him. It never did. He had grown used to me in a way that was quiet, steady, never demanding. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, and there was something in them that caught me off guard again. Not fear. Not uncertainty. Just awareness. Could not sleep, he said. His voice was calm, softer than mine, but grounded in a way that felt familiar, in a way I could not ignore anymore. The storm last night, I replied. It was an excuse, a simple one. He shook his head slightly. No. It was something else. I stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. Close enough to see the faint reflection of the morning light in his eyes. Close enough to feel the weight of the truth sitting between us, even if he did not know it yet. What were you thinking about? I asked. He looked down at the pendant again, his fingers tracing the edges the same way mine had the night before. The same motion. The same unconscious habit. I do not know, he admitted after a moment. It just feels like I am supposed to remember something. But I cannot. The word settled into me heavier than anything Daniel had said. I felt something shift again, deeper this time, something I could not push aside. Because I knew exactly what he was trying to remember. A night in the rain. A woman who stood just out of reach. A choice made in silence that shaped everything that came after. I sat down beside him, something I rarely did, closing the distance in a way that felt unfamiliar and necessary all at once. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was still, the kind of stillness that carried meaning without needing words. Do you ever wonder where you came from? I asked, keeping my voice steady. It was a question I had avoided for 8 years. He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at me again, studying my face with a focus that felt too deliberate for his age. I used to, he said finally. When I was younger. My chest tightened slightly. And now? He shrugged, a small, almost dismissive movement. Now I think, if someone left me here, they must have had a reason. I did not expect that. Not from him. Not like that. The simplicity of it. The acceptance. It hit harder than any accusation ever could have. Do you ever feel angry about it? I asked quietly. He shook his head again, more certain this time. No. Because whoever it was, they chose you. He said it like it was obvious. Like it answered everything. Like it meant something good. I looked away for a second, my jaw tightening as the weight of that trust settled into something I was not sure I deserved. Because he was right. She had chosen me. Out of everyone in this city, out of every possible place she could have gone, she had brought him to my gate and walked away. Not out of weakness. Not out of abandonment. But out of belief. And I had spent 8 years calling it coincidence. Liam, I said, my voice lower now, more controlled. He looked at me again, waiting. There are things about your past that I should have told you sooner. The words felt unfamiliar, heavier than any decision I had made in years. Because this was not about control anymore. This was about truth. And once I started, there was no going back. The words stayed between us longer than I expected, heavier than silence, sharper than anything I had ever said to him before, and for the first time in years, I realized I did not know how to continue, not because I lacked the truth, but because I did not know how much of it he was ready to carry, and maybe I was not ready to carry it either. But Liam did not look away, he did not shift or retreat, he simply waited, patient in a way that made it impossible to hide behind control or distance. So I exhaled slowly and let the past move forward whether I wanted it to or not. The night you came here, I said, keeping my voice steady even as the memory sharpened, you were not brought by accident. He tilted his head slightly, absorbing every word without interrupting. Someone chose this place for you. His fingers tightened around the pendant, not out of fear but recognition, like something inside him was beginning to align. Do you know who? He asked, and the question was simple. Direct, but it landed harder than anything else, because for 8 years, I had chosen not to ask it myself. I shook my head slowly, not because I did not have answers anymore, but because I had not earned the right to give them yet. I did not know, I said, correcting myself, but I am starting to understand. He watched me closely now, searching my face the same way I had searched his, and for a moment, I saw it clearly, not just resemblance, not just shared habits, but something deeper. Something that had been there from the beginning, something she must have seen when she made her decision. Was it my mother? He asked quietly, and the word mother felt unfamiliar in this space, like it did not belong here, like it had been left outside the gates years ago. but it was here now, unavoidable. I nodded once, slowly. Yes, I said, and the air shifted again, not tense, not broken, just changed, like something long buried had finally been named. Liam looked down at the pendant again, his thumb tracing its surface with more intention now. Did she not want me? He asked, and this time, there was something beneath the calm, not pain, not quite, but the beginning of it, and that was the moment I understood what she had been protecting him from all along, not the world, not the people in it, but this question, this single doubt that could reshape everything he believed about himself. I leaned forward slightly, my voice lower, more certain than anything I had said before. No, I said, firm enough that he looked up immediately. She wanted you enough to make the hardest choice she could have made. He held my gaze, waiting for more, needing more, and I did not look away this time. She brought you here because she believed this was the only place you would be safe. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else, because now they carried meaning I could not ignore. Liam frowned slightly, thinking, processing. Safe from what? He asked, and there it was, the question I had been avoiding since last night, the one that tied everything together. I straightened slightly, my control returning, but not as a shield, as clarity. That is what I am going to find out, I said, and for the first time, it was not just about her anymore, it was about him, about the reason she stayed hidden, about the reason she never came back. Liam studied me for another second, then nodded slowly, like he accepted that answer for now, like he trusted that I would not stop until I understood it myself, and that trust landed deeper than anything else, because it was the same trust she had placed in me 8 years ago, the same belief I had never questioned until now. I stood up after a moment, the weight of the conversation settling into something that felt less like uncertainty and more like direction. Go inside, I said quietly. It is getting cold. He did not argue, he rarely did, but before he stood, he looked at me one more time, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. If she chose you, he said, then she must have known something I do not. I did not answer right away, because he was right. She had known something, something I was only beginning to understand, something that had nothing to do with power or control or the world I ruled, something that had everything to do with what I had failed to see. And as Liam walked back toward the house, the pendant catching the morning light with every step, I realized the truth was no longer something waiting to be uncovered. It was already here, woven into every choice she made, every step she took away from him, every moment she stayed close without being seen, and whatever she had been protecting him from, it had not disappeared, it had simply been waiting. By the time the sun rose higher over the city, I had already made the decision I should have made years ago, not as a man in control, but as someone finally willing to question what control had cost me. And as I walked back inside, the silence of the house no longer felt like order, it felt like distance, like something carefully maintained to avoid truths that were now impossible to ignore. I found Daniel exactly where I expected him, waiting without asking, because he understood that when I moved this way, something had shifted beyond routine. I want everything, I said, my voice steady but no longer detached, not just where she works or where she lives. I want the spaces in between, the patterns, the reasons. He nodded once, already prepared, but I did not stop there, and I want to know who she was before all of this, before 8 years ago, before that night. Daniel hesitated for the first time, not out of uncertainty, but because he understood what I was really asking. I was not looking for a file, I was looking for a story, and stories like that were never simple. There is something else, he said carefully, placing another document in front of me, thinner than the others, but heavier in a way that mattered more. I glanced down, expecting another report, another timeline, but instead, it was a single photograph, slightly worn at the edges, like it had been handled more than once. I picked it up slowly, my fingers tightening just enough to feel it. And for a moment, everything else disappeared, because I knew that face before my mind could explain it. Emily Carter, standing outside what looked like a small clinic, her hair pulled back, her expression calm but distant, like someone who had learned how to exist without being noticed, and yet there was something else in her eyes, something I recognized immediately, not fear, not regret, but resolve, the kind that did not come from weakness, but from surviving something that changed you permanently. This was taken 6 years ago, Daniel said, watching my reaction closely. She was volunteering at a free clinic after a storm displaced several families. I did not respond right away, my focus still on the image, on the details I should not have recognized but did, the way she stood slightly turned, like she was always aware of her surroundings, the way her hands were positioned, steady, controlled, the kind of control that did not come from power, but from necessity. She does Not look like someone who ran, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Daniel shook his head. No, she does not, and that was when it became clear, she had not been hiding from me, not in the way I understood hiding, she had been positioning herself, moving just enough to stay out of reach, but never far enough to disappear completely, like she was watching something, waiting for something, or someone. I set the photograph down carefully. But the image stayed with me, sharper now, more real than any report or file. She came back, I said, the realization settling into something undeniable, not to take him, but to make sure he was still safe. Daniel did not need to confirm it, because we both knew it was true, and that truth changed everything, because it meant the night she left him was not an ending, it was the beginning of something she never stopped being part of. I moved toward the window again, but this time, I did not look at the city, I looked at my reflection. Searching for something I had not considered before, something she must have seen when she made her choice. She trusted me, I said slowly, the words carrying more weight now than they had the night before, not because of who I was, but because of who she believed I could be. The difference mattered, more than anything else, and it was something I had never thought to question until now. Behind me, Daniel shifted slightly, waiting for the next command, the next move, the next step in a plan that would normally be precise, immediate, controlled, but this was different. This was not about finding a target or solving a problem. This was about understanding a decision that had shaped 2 lives, maybe 3. I turned back toward the desk, my hand resting briefly on the edge as I made the choice that had been building since last night. Prepare the car, I said, my voice calm again, but no longer distant. This time, we do not wait. Daniel nodded once, already moving, but I stopped him with a single word, alone. He paused, just for a second, then inclined his head in quiet understanding before leaving the room, and as the door closed behind him, I picked up the photograph one more time. Studying her face, memorizing the details I had ignored for too long, because this was no longer about a mystery or a past I could control. This was about a woman who had trusted me with everything she had, and a truth I could not afford to misunderstand, because whatever she had been protecting Liam from, I was about to step directly into it. The drive across the city felt longer than it should have, even though I had taken this route countless times before. The streets familiar, the turns automatic, but nothing about this felt routine anymore, because for the first time, I was not moving toward a deal, a meeting, or a decision I could control. I was moving toward a person who had already changed my life without ever standing in front of me, and that uncertainty settled into something heavier with every mile. The clinic was smaller than I expected, tucked between a laundromat and a corner grocery store, the kind of place most people would pass without noticing, which made sense, because disappearing in plain sight required places exactly like this. I parked across the street, cutting the engine but not stepping out right away, my hands resting on the steering wheel as I studied the building, watching the steady flow of people coming in and out, ordinary lives, ordinary problems, a world that existed completely separate from mine, and yet she had chosen it, not out of necessity, but out of purpose. I stepped out after a moment, the air cooler than I expected, carrying the faint scent of rain from the night before, and as I crossed the street, I realized something I had not considered until now. I did not know what I was going to say to her, not because I lacked questions, but because none of them felt sufficient. None of them could fully capture 8 years of silence, of distance, of choices that had shaped everything without explanation. The bell above the clinic door chimed softly as I pushed it open, and for a moment, everything slowed. The quiet hum of fluorescent lights, the faint murmur of voices from the back, the scent of antiseptic and something warmer underneath it, something human, something real, and then I saw her. She stood behind the front desk, flipping through a chart, her movements efficient but unhurried, like she had done this 1,000 times, like this place was not just where she worked, but where she belonged. She looked up when the door closed behind me, and for a second, there was nothing, no recognition, no reaction, just a neutral glance like any other patient walking in. But then it changed, subtle, almost imperceptible. Her eyes paused on mine a fraction longer than necessary, her hand stilled on the paper, and something in her expression shifted, not shock, not fear, but awareness, the kind that came from already knowing this moment would happen someday, just not when. "We are closing in 20 minutes, she said, her voice calm, steady, controlled in a way that felt familiar for reasons I could not ignore. I took a few steps closer, stopping just in front of the desk, close enough to see the details I had memorized from the photograph. The faint lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the quiet strength in the way she held herself. The absence of panic where most people would have already lost control. Emily Carter, I said, not as a question, but as confirmation. She did not deny it, did not look away, did not even hesitate. She simply met my gaze fully now, whatever distance had been there dissolving into something more direct, more real. Alexander Vance, she replied, and the way she said my name told me everything I needed to know. She had always known where he was, who I was, what I represented, and she had still chosen me. The silence between us stretched, but it was not empty, it was full of everything neither of us had said for 8 years. Every unanswered question, every decision that had led us here, and for the first time since I stepped into this, I understood something clearly. This was not going to be a confrontation, it was going to be a revelation. You should not be here, she said quietly, not as a warning, but as a fact, and that was when I knew, whatever she had been protecting Liam from, it was not over, not gone, just waiting, exactly as I had felt it. I leaned slightly forward, my voice lower now, more deliberate. You left him at my gate, I said, watching her closely, waiting for something to break, to shift, to reveal itself, but she did not flinch, did not look away, did not retreat. Instead, she held my gaze with a steadiness that answered more than words ever could. No, she said softly, and for the first time, there was something beneath her control, not fear, not regret, but truth. I brought him to the only place I knew he would survive, and just like that, everything I thought I understood about that night changed. For a moment, I said nothing, because her words did not feel like an explanation, they felt like a truth that had existed long before I ever asked the question, and the difference mattered more than anything else. I studied her face carefully, searching for hesitation, for doubt, for anything that would suggest she was protecting herself instead of him, but there was none, just that same quiet resolve I had seen in the photograph. The same certainty that had guided her 8 years ago. You are telling me you trusted me with his life, I said slowly, not as an accusation, but as something I was still trying to understand. She exhaled softly, her gaze steady on mine. I did not trust who you were, she replied, and the honesty in that answer landed sharper than any lie could have, but she did not stop there. I trusted who you would be when it mattered. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else she could have said, because they were not about the past, they were about something she had seen in me that I had not seen in myself. I let out a quiet breath, my jaw tightening slightly as that realization took shape. You made a decision based on something that did not exist yet, I said, and this time, there was a faint edge to my voice, not anger, but disbelief. She shook her head once, a small, controlled movement. No, she said, I made a decision based on the only moment that ever mattered. I frowned slightly, the meaning not fully clear, and she noticed. Of course she did, because she had always been paying attention, even when I had not. You do not remember, she said quietly, and there was no accusation in it. Just a simple statement of fact. That was the first crack, the first shift in everything I thought I understood. Remember what? I asked, my voice lower now, more focused, because whatever she was about to say, I knew it was going to change something fundamental. She hesitated for the first time, not out of fear, but because she was choosing her words carefully, like she had done 1,000 times before when silence had been safer than truth. The night before I left him, she said, and just like that, the air in the room felt different, heavier, like something long buried was finally being brought to the surface. I did not interrupt, did not move, did not break the moment, because I knew this was the part she had never told anyone, the part that explained everything. You were not supposed to be there, she continued, her voice steady but quieter now, more personal. It was not your world. Not that part of it. But you showed up anyway. Something in my memory shifted, faint, distant, like trying to recall a dream that never fully formed. I stayed silent, letting her continue. There was a situation, she said carefully, avoiding details she did not need to say out loud. People who were not supposed to cross paths did, and I was in the middle of it. Her eyes held mine, searching for recognition that was not there yet. You could have walked away, she said. No one would have blamed you. No one would have expected you to stay. My chest tightened slightly, something unfamiliar stirring beneath the surface, but you did not, she added, and now there was something in her voice that had not been there before, not emotion exactly, but memory, something real and unfiltered. You stayed until everything was quiet again, she finished, and for a moment, neither of us spoke, because the meaning behind those words was clear without needing to be explained. I had done something I did not remember, something that had shown her a version of me I had never considered important enough to keep, and she had built her entire decision on that single moment. That is why, she said finally, softer now, but no less certain. That is why I brought him to you. I looked at her, really looked this time, not as a mystery, not as a problem to solve, but as someone who had seen me clearly when I had not seen myself at all. And for the first time since this began, I understood something. That went beyond control, beyond power, beyond anything I had built. She had not taken a risk, she had made a choice, and that choice had been right, because Liam was safe, because he had grown into someone who trusted the world in a way I never had, and because standing here now, facing the truth I had ignored for too long, I could no longer deny it either. The silence that followed her words did not feel empty, it felt full, like something had finally settled into place after years of being just out of reach, and for the first time, I was not trying to control it, I was trying to understand it, really understand it, not as a man who needed answers, but as someone who had been part of a decision he never knew existed. You saw something in me that I did not, I said quietly, not as a question, but as a realization I could no longer avoid. She nodded once, her expression softer now, not guarded the way it had been when I first walked in, but not completely open either, like she had spent years learning how to stand in the middle of both. You gave me a reason to believe he would not grow up afraid, she said, and that word stayed with me, afraid, because I had built my entire world around eliminating fear, controlling it, using it when necessary, but never once had I considered what it meant to grow up without it, to exist without that constant weight shaping every decision. And you thought I could give him that, I replied, more to myself than to her. She did not hesitate this time. I knew you could, she said, and there was no doubt in her voice, none at all, like this had never been uncertain for her, not even for a moment. I let out a slow breath, running a hand along the edge of the desk as my thoughts shifted, aligning into something clearer, something sharper. Then tell me what you were protecting him from, I said, my voice steady again, because this was the part that still did not fit, the part that explained everything else. Her gaze dropped for the first time since I arrived, not out of avoidance, but out of memory, like she was stepping back into something she had spent years keeping contained. It was never just about him, she said quietly, and that alone told me everything was about to change again. I did not interrupt, did not move, because I knew this was the truth she had never allowed herself to say out loud. It was about what he would be connected to if he stayed with me, she continued, her voice controlled but softer now. People who do not forget, people who do not let things go just because time passes. I felt something tighten in my chest, not fear, but recognition, because I knew exactly the kind of world she was describing, even if she had never been part of mine directly. You were involved with them, I said, not as an accusation, but as a confirmation. She shook her head slightly. No, not by choice, she replied. But I saw enough to know what it would mean if they knew about him. The room felt smaller again, not because of what she was saying, but because of how much she had carried alone, without asking for help, without expecting anything in return. So you brought him to me, I said, the pieces finally locking into place, because you believed my world was safer than yours. She looked up at me again, her eyes steady, certain, because your world has rules, she said, mine did not, and that difference mattered more than anything else, because rules meant control, structure, limits, things I had spent years building and enforcing. Things that, for the first time, were not just about power, but about protection. I nodded slowly, understanding it now in a way I had not before. And you stayed close, I added, watching her carefully. She did not deny it. I needed to see that I was right, she said simply, that he was safe, that he was becoming someone who did not carry what I had to. Her voice caught just slightly on the last words, the only sign of anything she had kept buried for years. I exhaled slowly, the weight of everything settling into something I could not ignore anymore. He is safe, I said, my voice lower now, more certain than anything else I had said since I walked in, and he is exactly who you hoped he would be. She closed her eyes for just a second, a small moment, but it said more than anything else she could have expressed, and when she opened them again, there was something different there, not just relief, but something quieter, something that had been waiting for this confirmation for a long time. Then you did not fail him, she said softly, and the words landed deeper than anything else, because for the first time, I was not measuring success by control or power or outcome. I was measuring it by something far simpler, something far more difficult. And as I stood there, looking at the woman who had trusted me with everything without ever asking for anything back, I realized this was not the end of the truth. It was only the beginning of what came next, because now there was only one question left that mattered, and it was not about the past. It was about whether she was finally ready to stop standing outside the life she had protected for so long. For a long moment, neither of us moved, and it felt like the world outside that small clinic had paused without asking permission, like everything that mattered had narrowed down to this single space, this single choice that had been waiting for 8 years to be made. I watched her carefully, not as someone I needed to understand anymore, but as someone who had already shown me everything I needed to see, and the only thing left was whether she would step forward or stay where she had always kept herself, just outside the life she had protected. You stayed away because you thought it was the only way to keep him safe, I said quietly. Not as a question, but as a truth. We both understood now. She nodded once, her expression calm but no longer distant, like something inside her had already shifted, even if she had not acted on it yet. And now? I asked, my voice steady, giving her the space to answer without pressure, without control, because this decision had never been mine to make. She exhaled slowly, her gaze lowering for a brief moment before returning to mine, and in that small movement, I saw everything she had carried for years, every second of watching from a distance, every moment of choosing not to step closer, every silent confirmation that he was safe even if she was not part of it. Now I know he is, she said softly. And there was something final in that, something that closed one chapter even as another began. I nodded slightly, accepting that, but not letting it end there, because it could not end there, not anymore. He deserves to know you, I said, the word simple, direct, but carrying more weight than anything else I had said to her. She did not respond immediately, and I did not expect her to, because this was not a question of truth, it was a question of fear, of risk, of everything she had spent years avoiding. If I step into his life now, she said slowly, choosing each word with care, I change everything he believes about where he came from. I held her gaze, understanding that concern, but not agreeing with the conclusion. You do not change it, I replied, my voice firm but not harsh. You complete it. The difference mattered, more than she was willing to admit, because what he had now was not the full truth. It was only the part that had been safe to live with, and he deserved more than that. He deserved to understand the choice that had shaped his life, not just the result of it. She studied me for a moment, searching for something, maybe doubt, maybe hesitation, but there was none, because for the first time, I was not speaking from control, I was speaking from certainty. He does not need perfection, I continued, quieter now, he needs honesty. The word settled into the space between us, and I could see it, the moment they reached her, the moment they shifted something she had kept locked away for too long. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, not in defeat, but in release, like she was finally allowing herself to consider something she had never believed she was allowed to have. And what happens after that? She asked, and this time, there was no distance in her voice, no careful separation, just a real question, one that mattered. I exhaled slowly, not because I did not have an answer, but because the answer was not something I could control either. We figure it out, I said simply, and for once, that was enough. Because this was not a situation that required strategy or precision, it required something I had spent most of my life avoiding, trust, the same thing she had given me 8 years ago without asking for anything in return, the same thing I was offering her now, not as a command, not as a demand, but as a choice. She looked at me for a long second, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded, and in that small movement, everything changed. Not loud.